Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Greetings. And today we're going to get into. I keep telling people that we're going to be doing the media, and I keep changing my mind on that. I'm thinking, well, we know an awful lot about the media. We have a lot of opinions on the media. We see it in action every day, and I keep opting to head into some things that most Americans don't know about, probably should know about. And this time it's going to be domestic policy. We're going to take a look at that, and probably going to end up with economic policy. And I'll dwell more on that when we get there, but I think it's something that Americans are woefully ignorant of. The media, I wouldn't know where to start with the media, to tell you the truth. But anyway, that's what we're going to do, domestic policy. And with this particular chapter, I'm going to be looking at becoming aware of the evolution of healthcare policy in the United States, develop a deeper understanding of American healthcare policy in general, and investigate U.S. healthcare spending and evaluate it. So we're going to be taking a long look at healthcare. Some of the major heads-up terms here, too. We're going to take a look at non-means-based. You hear about that, non-means-based. Non-means-based means that people can receive cash assistance to anyone that's qualified to cash assistance. Means tested, on the other hand, one must fall under a certain income level to receive benefits. Now, before we get into the meat and potatoes here, you'll notice I don't have the easel behind me. Realize that before I did all that, I'm now using my laptop, but I was using my phone, and it was taking an awful long time to download all that. So I went to using the laptop, and it's a lot more economical and less time consuming. But I noticed that as I was writing things were appearing backwards. So hence no easel. And you folks could, I'm going to, go through the notes, that white space, and you folks can stop the tape or whatever and fill that in, whatever works. Let's take a look at this now. The roots of public policy, and this is kind of FYI here before we get into some things like some fills. Public policy, we talk about the roots of domestic policy, the policy-making process. We're looking at the way government deals with problems and concerns, and it's comprised of laws and regulations that are authoritative and binding. It's a process, not really necessarily a point in time. And then it moves to stages and becomes law by passing Congress, and then the president, then the bureaucracies, right? And they implement it and interpret it. Sometimes the court gets a shot too. The best example that we can all relate to is the speed limit, right? The speed limit, it's set by law. The law says that 55 miles per hour. And let's say you're tracing down the interstate 15 in Nevada, somewhere out in the middle of nowhere. As a police, are the police going to stop you, ticket you for going 65 out there? Right? Probably not. That same road inside Las Vegas, Nevada, city limits, you're probably going to get a ticket, going that speed. So the rules depend upon a lot of factors. The model of policy-making process. You have agenda setting. Once a problem gets defined, it needs to be put on the agenda for consideration. And they're just two basic, just for FYI here, your FYI, two basic kinds of agenda. Systematic agenda, That's a discussion agenda of all issues that are, basically seen as something that receives merit to talk about, consider public attention. And then you have your governmental or institutional only legislators or public officials feel obliged to devote some serious time and attention to. You could look at figure 15.1 on page 525 for more information on that. Public formation or policy formation. You have the crafting of appropriate and acceptable courses of action to ameliorate or look at problems. Then policy adoption. That's the making of a law or laws that give the policy legal force. And again, think back to a couple of chapters ago. You can remember how a bill becomes a law, right? The process of policy adoption is a complicated and a messy one, right? Also a messy one that assures on a variety of fronts in order to achieve success. They're written in very vague ways, so no one will be offended, and if you don't offend people, the laws will pass, right? A lot of negotiating, bargaining, compromise, and these are the kind of the hallmarks, if you will, of the legislation. Much of it is incremental, and many bills die. Budgeting, you have to have a budget for this. You have to have a budget. Policy implementation. This is basically how your policies are carried out, implemented by administrative agencies. We looked at that last chapter, right? A lot of power given to your administrative agencies. There are a number of techniques. You have authoritative techniques. Folks don't comply with it, you jail them, right? You jail them, you give them fines, right? Then you have your incentive techniques. People tax companies tax imply encourage things like charitable giving, subsidies for farmers, right, and so on. Then you have your capacity techniques. Provide people with information, right? Education, training, job training, reliable interest rate information, these types of things. Then you have your hortatory techniques, appealing to people's best instincts. That's where you have your slogans, right? Only you can prevent fires, right? That one, right? One, give a hoot, don't pollute. These types of things. So, to adequately administer public policies, you got to have appropriate technique, you got to have the funding, the political support, and the will, and really the skill of your agency personnel. Policy evaluation, right? Policy evaluation is kind of a way of determining whether a policy is working and where it's being adequately administered. Some evaluation is based on anecdotal evidence, right? Stories from people, right? Political considerations, if it's popular, it must be good. Some evaluations built on just good solid facts and thorough analysis. Sometimes it's undertaken by many players, right? Many players, different political goals. The demise of a program is rare, though, right? Might be modified or amended or limp along, but as we've talked about in this class, that once there is a program in the government, you're going to be hard pressed to see that go away, right? So think about that, when you vote in the future. Let's take a look at some fills here. These are some things that you're going to need to talk about: the security and healthcare policies. Most social welfare programs are creatures of the 20th century. In the early years of the Republic, people did not want or need much government assistance, except for things like public schools, and veterans benefits. Both came about gradually and accelerated after the Civil War. Right, we looked at that too. Local governments, back then local governments would occasionally give aid, but one basically relied on family, church, neighbors, and charities when things got rough, right? And that attitude began to change in the 19th century. Political power, the right to vote, more needs coming into the picture, begat a desire for economic power, the right and to be treated well. Farmers and labor began to organize to assert their interests. Farmers were threatened by wildly fluctuating prices for the commodities they produced, and workers felt exploited. They worked long hours for little pay and hazardous conditions. And then you had a severe depression in the 1890s, led to protests and demands for government assistance by some. But it was not yet a broad-based movement. It was not yet a broad-based movement. The overwhelming attitude about poverty was that the poor people were just lazy. They were lazy. Then the Great Depression of the 1930s hit, and hardworking people, lots of them, were tossed out of work. Debunked the idea that only the lazy were unemployed, and it spurred the government action. And kind of a watershed event, maybe went the other way, right? You could argue that it released the stigma of government assistance, right, and led to what many would argue would be a climate of too many people relying on the federal government. So a consensus was created that the government needed to intervene. Income security. The Roosevelt administration began to design programs to help the needy and establish the Committee on Economic Security, or the CES, to make recommendations. Most of the CES proposals were later endorsed by the president and enacted in Congress in 1935 as the Social Security Act. Now, again, remember, we're talking about the Great Depression era here. So the Social Security Act made the government the major contributor to income security. And the three programs were created out of this act. The first one was old age insurance, right? What we now call Social Security. Secondly, public assistance for the needy, the aged, blind, families with dependent children. The disabled were added later. And then three, unemployment insurance. There have been modifications since that time, but the basic programs remain intact. National health insurance was considered at the same time. However, strong opposition from the American Medical Association managed to defeat its passage. Healthcare, right? Segueing into healthcare, just kind of some FYI information here for you. First national healthcare program in 1790 to aid disabled and ill seamen. Local governments had established public health departments in the early 19th century. Much of it was public sanitation, clean water, and disease prevention. The pasteurization of milk and promotion of immunization programs at this juncture emerged. You had your first Surgeon General that was appointed in 1871. In 1891-92, you had the Public Health Service examined in the Ellis Island. In late 1945, now getting back up into after the Great Depression era, in late 1945, Harry Truman, FDR's successor, again put national health insurance on the policy agenda. 58% of Americans approved of the idea. 1958, Democrats in Congress proposed health care for the elderly, and in 1964, they got it passed. That program, I'm going to dwell on this in a few minutes, became known as Medicare. The Ways and Means Committee out of the House of Representatives added provisions to cover the poor. That was Medicaid. 1993, with the same goals of nationalizing health care. March 23, 2010, after intense battles in Congress, President Obama signed the Patient Protection and Affordable Health Care Act. I'm going to provide for you some details on that controversial legislation that you hear a lot about. A lot of people don't know about the nuts and bolts of it. I'm going to include that for your information on the course page. In 2017, the Trump administration and Congress killed the mandate. Now, some more things I want to know about here for the quiz: income security and healthcare policies today. Income security. Let's take a look at income security. Income security programs are supposed to protect people against loss of income due to disability, unemployment, or death of the family breadwinner. And thanks to these programs, cases to total deprivation are now rare. But many people still cannot afford a decent standard of living for themselves or their families. So even with these programs in place, many families struggle to survive and never manage to really dig their way out of poverty. You're seeing some of this being enacted right now this very hour, right? Most of our families will be getting kind of rebate checks, right? Coming up here from the federal government to help aid through the instability of this, this virus. And some people are, upset about the government spending. I guess, if I may, I would say this is, I'm kind of looking at this more of a tax cut, maybe giving the American people back money that we've seen in this class is wasted. The ruling classes so much that why not give some? Right? So the official poverty line for a family of 4 as of 2016 was $24,563. That was the official poverty line. Let's take a look at some of the easel to manage this. There are 2 kinds of income security programs. And the first one is non-means based. Non-means based. And then you have your means programs. Non-means based, cash assistance to any qualified beneficiary, right? Social Security is this type of program. Then you have your means tested programs that requires to first meet certain tests, such as falling below a certain income level, right? Food stamps. Food stamps are such a program. Let's take a look at social insurance, and I'm just going to kind of FYI material here. Social insurance, old age survivors and disability insurance. This provides retired workers, survivors of covered workers like spouses and children, and permanently disabled. This is usually referred to as Social Security. A payroll tax of a few years back anyway was 7.65% of the first 100,000 wages or salaries paid by the employee and matched by the employer. This is put into a so-called Social Security Trust Fund. People make over 100,000 pay on amounts they earn above this figure. Nor is Social Security tax paid on non-wage, non-salary income such as dividends. The primary source of income, Social Security, is for many retired people. In November 2018, I think it was, the average Social Security benefit was $1,653.70 per month, and the maximum benefit was $2,788 per month. Congress recently removed the limit on how much a retired person can make in income. So there's no limit on earnings for over 65 who receive Social Security. It's not a bad thing, right? People are living longer, healthier lives. They could do part-time things to help the economy out and not work. Unearned income is not considered for Social Security, right? Good things. Good things. Like I said, the number of retirees is growing. Number of working people is shrinking. Right? Your generation will be finding out about this sooner rather than later. Who's going to pay for guys like me, who are going to be getting probably Social Security in the next 10 years here anyway. More than 40 people, permanently disabled people. This is the largest entitlement program. Then you have your unemployment insurance. Unemployment insurance, financed by employer payroll tax, paid through no fault of their own, right? No fault of their own. Those laid off during like a time like this, thousands, millions of people being furloughed. It does not cover those who get fired or quit and or who are able to work and just refuse to do it. It's run by the state. In 2008, this is over 10 years ago, the weekly benefit ranged from $235 in Mississippi to $735 in Massachusetts. Only half of the people counted as unemployed actually receive benefits. So, unemployment rate today is, as of last month, from the numbers in last month, it was 4.4%. That's how good the economy was doing. Trump's not exaggerating about that. Be interested to see. I'm going to guess around 5.5 maybe, which is still just a little above full employment. Full employment is considered 5. That's still not bad. Still a lot better than it was, for a while before he came into office. Social insurance means tested programs. You have supplementary security income, which is SSI, right? SSI. In order to receive SSI, you have to be truly poor and have no real assets. Okay. 2008 monthly payments were $771 for an individual and per month, and $1,157 for a married couple. The federal government pays most of that bill, but the states supplement some of it. Family and child support. 1950, the AFDC, right? AFDC was quite limited because there were few unmarried mothers in the 1930s, right? But since 1960, the number of unmarried mothers rose due to mothers, growing divorce rate, right? And we looked at that with Código Villa last time or time before that. The ruling classes have basically made it very easy to receive benefits if you fit category. And of course, married families pick up the tab on a lot of that. A lot of people would say it penalizes people that are doing what they should, I suppose. So there have been numerous attempts to reform AFDC, including education and training programs. 1996, there was a program providing cash benefits, and there were 6 or 7 stipulations under that folks had to abide by. Mothers of children over 5 must go to work within 2 years of that 5th birthday if they were going to receive benefits. Things like this. I'm trying to think of some of them. Mothers must provide information about the child's father to be eligible. Right? Cash welfare benefits, food stamps be no longer given to convicted drug felons. Kind of get the picture there. That was a very popular move during the Clinton years. And the House, it's a popular move for most Americans. George W. Bush enacted the TANF reauthorization program that strengthened work rules as well. Other tax credit, we hear about that a lot. Earned income tax credit that supports families, helping them move from welfare to work. It's kind of a net cash rebate for low-income taxpayers who pay no federal tax, but a person must have proof of earned income during that said year. Then the food stamp program. Originally, food stamps were an effort to increase the domestic market for farm commodities, right? The average participant, the average participant receives $256 a month, $127 a month. The household receives $256. Some other food-based programs you have nutritional assistance for women, infants, and children, otherwise known as WIC, school breakfast and lunch programs, and in some cities now there are actually school supper programs, right? So think about that one, school supper programs. Now, healthcare. Healthcare here. Now, healthcare, the government, as I've been alluding to, the government's been involved with healthcare since the early republic. In 2007, the U.S. government spent $69 billion on health, more than any other country, right? And then depending on who you talk to, the United States ranks as low as 37th on the quality of healthcare. Others would say it's probably at the top. Canada has a national healthcare system up there, but recently when one of their governors, I think it was along the Atlantic, one of the Atlantic provinces, had to have heart surgery, he did not get it done in Canada. He came across the border, and he's not the only Canadian that's done that. So depending on who you talk to, it probably comes down to the view of how you think. And so where the United States is ranked, we'll rank it at the top. We've spent nearly $3.5 trillion on healthcare over the years, about 18% of our GDP. Much of that money goes to 2 programs, Medicare and Medicaid. Now, Medicare, let's take a look at this. Medicare covers people who receive Social Security benefits. Medicare Part A covers all Americans automatically at age 65, covers hospitalization, some skilled nursing care, and home health services. Individuals pay about $700 in medical bills before Part A kicks in. Medicare is financed by a payroll tax of 0.45% paid by employees on total wages and salaries. Now, Part B Part B, you see your white space there. Part B is optional. Part B is optional and covers physician services, outpatient and diagnostics, X-rays, covers X-rays and other items not covered in Part A. Excluded in Part B are eyeglasses, prescription drugs, and leaving out, pardon me, a couple of things. Part D. Now, Part D is the prescription drug benefit. Part D is the prescription drug benefit, which began operating back in, I think it was 2006. And for those who participate, there is a monthly premium of $35, annual to $150, and the plan pays 75% of covered medicines. Now, if your annual drug costs exceed, I think it's $5,100, the program can pay 95%. There are, however, some odd gaps in coverage. Democrats charge that the primary beneficiaries of this plan are the drug and insurance companies. The government under this law is expressly prohibited from negotiating lower drug prices for Medicare drugs. So it's also a hugely expensive benefit that will exacerbate the problems with Social Security and healthcare costs as the baby boomers retire, right? We know that's a big lot. It's the baby boomers retire. So as people live longer, Medicare has become more costly. So the elderly need more medical services, and medical care costs are rising. So the attempt to control these costs has, I don't even know if it's arguable anymore, hasn't been very effective. And the lobby in favor of these entitlements is quite strong. Because remember, older folks, right? Older people are more likely to vote than younger people. For a visual on this spending and the age groups, look at figure 15, page 529 for you, as I like to say, you visual types. Now, got that white space there again here. Medicare or Medicaid. Just briefly spend a couple minutes on this. Medicaid is jointly financed by states and the national government. The national government pays anywhere from about 50 to 80% of Medicaid costs based on average per capita income, meaning that your poor states get more federal monies. And pages 528, 529, your authors have a breakdown on this. And I'm not going to dwell on the Affordable Health Care Act here. I'm going to somehow include this. You've either included it in your lecture model by the time you see me, or I'll have a separate copy of that on the course page. And I'm looking at that as I flip through that right now. But I don't want to talk about that here. Let's look at public health as we start to near the end here. Public health. The government also plays a major role in funding research and prevention in infectious and chronic diseases, right? Ongoing right now, correct? Public health is considered an important policy area for the government as in the national citizenry. Tools such as immunization, education, ideas of individuality and personal liberty can often conflict with the government's interest in public health. saw a clip today, and I know if I keep these videos and use them for classes, in the future, I'm going to look back. Some of the things I'm saying very dated, but I'll say it. I saw the State House today in Ohio was being surrounded by citizens, saying we want our freedom. Our freedom does not stop, at the beginning of your fear. Talking about the fear of the virus, and people want to go back to work, right? So saying the individual liberties are being bumped in by the state and federal governments. Some religious sects object to vaccines. Some parents refuse to vaccinate their children because they fear complications more than the disease the vaccines are allegedly prevent. You have your Centers for Disease Control, set nutritional and exercise guidelines, but stop short of mandating them because that would conflict with American ideas about personal liberty, just to name a few. Kind of wrapping it up here, toward reform and environmental policy, you have concerns about energy and environmental issues that have been cyclical. For years, they were secondary concerns. The U.S. had abundant and relatively cheap coal. We're looking at an energy environmental policy here. Just kind of an FYI here. Fossil fuels were inexpensive back then, but then in the 1970s, people demanded environmental protections due to a number of environmental disasters. Cuyahoga River Fire in 1969 in Ohio. Rachel Carson's, some of you guys may have read her back in high school. Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, a book about the perils of pesticides. Of course, there's been counter literature up against that book about how malaria has been eradicated due to the spraying of DDT. But that's for another subject, maybe another class, right? 3 Mile Island right here in Pennsylvania, 1979. The alleged meltdown, right, actually did what it was supposed to do. There was just some faulty construction of it. And some of these high-profile incidents really ignited and sparked interest in environmental protection. Foundations of energy policy, the American economy in post-World War II era. Back then it ran on cheap energy. And then we had the oil shocks of 1973. I remember that. I was young. The gallon of gas rose 38 cents to 55 cents. At that time, the government established 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. You had standards for fuel efficiency cars. That's back when the what they call the Japanese invasion of the small cars began to come into the United States, right? Those comfortable gas eaters, the big station wagons and Impalas, and started to, no, they weren't as popular. 1970 saw a flurry of environmental policy. President Nixon created the EPA, environmental law of 1970, and the Clean Water Act of 1972, just to name two big ones. 1980s, you saw an interest in energy and environmental policies declining. Ronald Reagan was president during that time period as well. A lot of deregulation occurred. The belief from the Reagan administration and many other Americans was that the market should solve problems, and they worked against active government regulation. In fact, that fire I just talked about, a Cuyahoga River in 1969 in Ohio. It's basically private industries that got together and had the rivers cleaned up during that time as well. The Obama administration saw over 4,000 regulations time period. Trump has increased fossil fuel and has scrapped many Obama era regulations. Fracking is now very prominent, and many believe that there has led to the United States being virtually energy independent from maybe some questionable allies right over in the Middle East, and some not arguably not allies. So I'm looking at my desk here, and I forgot to break out the graphic organizer to wrap this up, but I will have that on your course page. You guys can check that out. So some of you will be seeing this on Thursday, others on Monday, and I will be guys with have a summing up sheet. I haven't really, as I'm recording this now, I haven't thought about how I'm going to have you guys practice with these facts. Probably give you guys a summing up sheet, some kind of question or something. Again, is when we generally met, and I'll close the windows after that. If things are not handed in after those windows close, I'm going to just deem that as there was an absence, right? Absence for attendance, and the subsequent participation that comes with that. So anyway, all right, you guys have questions, comments. You guys know I'm outside of Sundays. I'm circulating around my desktop a lot, my emails, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Until next time, I will talk to you later. Have a great day, and certainly bye.